not convey the whole pain and needs of the society.
I cannot say that there are few women in political parties. However, analyses show that they often perform basic work. For example, the dissemination of information during the campaign or public relations. In the end, women are always somewhere at the bottom of the party list, which, of course, reduces their chances of getting into Parliament. And even when we're talking about women who have managed to become active political figures, I must say that it does not change the picture in general. I analysed the pre-election rhetoric of female politicians and concluded that none of these women were interested in representing women as a social group. There is no single political party that would take into account, let alone try to solve, problems that concern women.
The sharp decline in the number of women in positions of power in Georgia is not unique. This trend is evident in all post-Soviet countries. This means that the gender balance was created artificially in the Soviet Union and could not stand the test of time.
We are talking about power sharing. We are talking about a patriarchal culture and requesting that men voluntarily share the power with women. This happens only in fairy tales. In Europe, in order to achieve this, women really had to fight for their rights. And in Georgia, we can only request that the political parties take our recommendations into account.
In Georgia, we often talk about the cult of respect for women as part of our tradition. However, real life does not always confirm this thesis. One of the most serious and urgent problems of the gender movement in Georgia is domestic violence. In 2009, the UN Population Fund conducted a large-scale study for the first time in Georgia, which showed that nearly a third of women face physical or psychological violence from men. Liberali, a popular magazine, dedicated an article to this topic.
According to the study, about 34% of the 2,000 women surveyed have at least one reason to justify a husband beating his wife. That's awful. Women believe that a husband has the right to beat his wife if she is unfaithful. There is a fairly high percentage of women, about 30%, who are not allowed by their husbands to see friends or relatives.
Natia just graduated from the university and believes that most young people in Georgia are still quite immature, living at their parents' expense rather than striving for economic independence.
In recent years, such surveys have been conducted quite often, and I still hear these stereotypes that the most important thing for a woman is the household and raising children. Our society still does not understand that a woman can put her career first instead of marriage. The statistics prove it as well. At universities, female students outnumber male students, but after graduation, generally the boys get jobs and the girls get married and dedicate themselves to family life. I think that the imposition of stereotypes affects not only women but also men. From early childhood, boys are taught that man must be in charge of the family. They are burdened with more rights and duties than they even want.
To better understand the role of women in the traditions of Georgian society, we went to the mountains. The Svaneti region in Georgia is considered to be the highest populated place in Europe, 2,400 meters above sea level. Svanetians are proud of the fact that during their 1,000-year history, they have not known any ruler. As in other mountainous areas of Georgia, here too a military democracy was formed in the Middle Ages. The famous Svanetian towers, where whole families hid to protect themselves from the attacks of enemies, are sightseeing attractions for today's tourists. And to learn about their traditions, we went to the museum. The elder, called Mahfshi in Svaneti, was elected at a general assembly with the participation of both men and women. In peacetime, Mahfshi was a judge, and in times of war he led the army. The most important problems of the community were resolved at general assemblies.
The stick I am holding in my hand is called Midra. It was borne by the elder, who served as a mediator during disputes. Svaneti was a free territory, and, accordingly, its people resolved domestic or economic disputes themselves. Of course, most of the decisions were made by men, but in the process of discussions, women also participated quite often and exerted their influence. Women's views were not ignored. The women had a major role and function in the family and the community. Of course, women did not participate in the Svanetian ritual of swearing an oath on the icon, but they could express their opinions on an equal basis with men.
For several years, Svaneti has been actively developing tourism. The workload has increased and the women here are the leaders again. It is easier for women to find work in the service sector. In this, the harsh laws of the mountains, which were established in the Middle Ages, contradict the modern reality. Even though a woman can support a family, in public and family life, she plays only a secondary role after men. 10 years ago, Rusudan Nakani created the first and only women's NGO in the mountainous region. The organization ceased to exist a full 3 years ago. Rusudan now owns a small shop. According to her, the main problems for women in this region are domestic violence, a nearly zero level of political activity by women, dependence on a public opinion and stereotypes. Rusudan hopes that a new generation will be more fortunate.
My generation is already lost, because as the years go by, the level of initiatives decreases. We are absorbed by everyday problems. We made many concessions, and I do not want our children to repeat the same. And we need support from the whole society so that their lives, too, won't be passed in vain, so that they have some freedom, so that they spend their lives meaningfully.
Another region, Marneoli. Azerbaijanis live here, one of the largest national minorities in Georgia. The problems are similar here. A low level of political and social activities, stereotypes, practically total dependence of women on their families. The fact that they do not know the state language exacerbates the situation. Leyla Suleymanova leads a unique organization called the Union of Azerbaijani Women of Georgia. She believes that the emphasis should be placed on education. In 10 years, around 50,000 people have participated in various programs offered by the organization. At the Center for Integration, one can learn Georgian and English, get legal advice, and even learn a new profession. For example, how to weave carpets.
We are trying to attract women to public activities, to elections, at least in order to be able to solve basic problems of everyday life in their own communities. The more women participate in local government, the more social problems will be solved, and the easier it will be for women themselves to live in this society.
Statistics show that in 48% of families, a woman is the main breadwinner or contributes as much to the family budget as her husband. However, women's rights in the labour market continue to be violated.
Changes that were recently made to the Labour Code may be perceived as discriminatory practice. For example, the law does not prohibit a contractor's firing a pregnant woman or a woman with small children, or not hiring her despite equal qualifications. This puts professional women on an unequal footing compared with men. What is more, 2 years ago, the social benefits for maternity leave were abolished.
Just because of the stereotypes of the patriarchal culture, which dictate that women are responsible for raising children, no man in Georgia could imagine taking paternity leave. Only maternity leave by women is acceptable. In any case, such leave is either unpaid or paid very little, so that here again, women suffer financially. In Sweden, 85% of employed men use paternity leave and participate actively in raising their children. I have never heard of such a case in Georgia. There is a paradoxical situation. Parliament passes laws on gender equality, but all of this comes from the top, while it needs to come from the bottom, from women themselves. I think these stereotypes are too deeply ingrained in our women, and this prevents them from being active.
The law on gender equality adopted by the Parliament is a new challenge for gender organizations. For the first time in Georgia, all laws will be analyzed in terms of gender politics. Up to now, the law has not required such an analysis.
Today's society is openly discussing the meaning of gender equality and discrimination, and is aware that violence is more than just physical abuse. Previously, it was not acceptable to discuss such issues in Georgia. It was a taboo. Today, gender-related laws have been institutionalized, so now the main problem is the implementation of this gender policy in all spheres of life. Salaries, positions, participation in politics and governance, in business and public activities. Gender discrimination should be abolished everywhere.
Today there are about 200 women's organizations registered in Georgia, but less than half are active. The main problem is low popularity. The main priorities of these organizations are the fight against poverty, labor migration, trafficking, domestic violence, and for women's active participation in politics. At the beginning of the 21st century, Georgia, a country aspiring to European values, has yet to relearn true equality between men and women.